This past week at the Dauphiné Libéré, we have been treated to a preview of what's on tap for this year's Tour de France. Two podium favourites for the Grenoble went head-to-head in a game of chess on wheels. The Aussie Cadel Evans was showing a newfound style of aggression that saw him attack endlessly, while Astana's Alberto Contador seemed to hold back, as if to not reveal his true strength. But neither rider is leading the race. Instead, after being barred from this year's Tour de France, Alejandro Valverde chose to unleash everything here with nothing to lose, and it's paid off. The Spaniard wears yellow with one stage remaining. The final leg of the Dauphiné Libéré is next on Versus. This is the city of Nancy. Hi everybody, I'm Phil Liggett. Alongside me is Paul Showman. We were here a week ago to watch the start of the Dauphiné Libéré race. Over 1,000 kilometres and a week of racing. Today, as the race ends in Grenoble, Alejandro Valverde will be defending the yellow jersey. But how did he get to come to that yellow jersey? Paul, it's been a great week of racing in an event that has had every element of world-class stage racing, including, of course, Mont Ventoux. Let's go back to stage number 2.
Yes, definitely. You know, over the first two stages, they were the only days, really, that the sprinters would have a chance to show why they are the best men in the world. But at 5 kilometres to go on the run into Dijon, David Miller leapt out of the pack. He stayed away until 150 metres to go, and then it all went pear-shaped. Well,
Tom Boonen thought they weren't going to catch him, and he went in the centre of our picture too soon in his comeback race after his cocaine bust. He didn't win the stage. It went, in fact, to Lamprey sprinter Angelo Furlan, one of the oldest men in the race, and who had done a terrible time trial the day before in Nancy. The man who won that time trial, of course, Cadel Evans, would keep his yellow jersey for day 2 of the race. Furlan winning ahead of BMC's Marcus Zerberg there, the champion of Switzerland. There's the yellow jersey for Cadel as we now move on to the 3rd day of racing, which takes the riders away from Tournus, heading south to Saint Etienne. 5 riders were clear after the 30th kilometre, and the man in the breakaway who was best placed was Nicky Terpstra of Milram, 41 seconds off Cadel's yellow jersey, and it was the worst result for Evans.
Well, it was for Evans, but everyone thinking about what was coming up in the individual time trial. Evans and all the other leaders lost themselves 1.5 minutes, so not only did Nicky Terpstra get himself the stage victory on at the end of stage 3, but he also took the overall lead. But Phil, that was on the eve of a very long time trial.
Yes, a long time trial for a race which is only a week long, of 26.3 miles, and the riders now fighting for all the odds here. In the green jersey as points leader, Cadel Evans out of yellow, but starting near the back of the field. The man to set the best time of the day, starting midfield, was the world champion of the time trial, Bert Grabsch, but the real battle was for the last place and the yellow jersey. Terpstra last to go.
Well, a difficult thing to do when you're last man to go and you're the leader of the bike race, especially with names like Contador and Evans, specialists in the individual time trial. Alejandro Valverde claimed that this was not the right course to suit his abilities, but he finished fairly well up in a 10th place, losing himself 1 minute and 38 seconds to Grabsch, the world champion.
Yes, he'd won the time trial a year ago, but it was much hilly, much more different course. Contador came in on his new time trial bike, setting the 4th best time here, as he now thinks again of challenging for the Tour de France. Cadel Evans proving bang on form for this race. He's finished 2nd overall 2 years running. He finished 2nd in this race only to Bert Grabsch, and therefore a yellow jersey would await. Poor old Terpstra, mechanicals at the start, finishes on his road racing machine rather than his time trial bike, and was well out of it. And so his dream of continuing in yellow was over. A nice rewarding win, the first of the year for Team Columbia High Roads. Bert Grabsch as a world champion of the time trial, and Cadel Evans back in yellow as they faced up to the big climb of Mont Ventoux, a race of 154 kilometres from Valence, and the field virtually all together as they started the climb. And then the attack. He'd said it in the morning he would attack, and Valverde was true to his word.
Valverde had said he was going to race this Dauphiné Libéré right to the very end and try and win the bike race overall, and he certainly lived true to his word once he got to the slopes of the Mont Ventoux. Behind, everybody looked at Cadel Evans to do the pacemaking, but Cadel didn't have any friends in that group.
No, well, Sylvester Schmidt was certainly a friend of Alejandro Valverde. He caught up with Schmidt. Schmidt clearly had a word with him, promising to work if he let him win at the top, while Evans had himself occupied with the whereabouts of the other strong men. He could not rid himself of anyone. Even the new boy here, Wolfgang, who rides for Saxo Bank, was having his chance to distinguish himself on one of the most revered mountains in international cycle racing. There was attacks and counter-attacks, but Valverde was up front looking for 1 minute and 54 seconds, and he was getting all of that plus more.
A bit of drama at the top, though, because Valverde looked over his shoulder. I think he wanted to give the victory to the young man who's with him, Sylvester Schmidt, who's never won a Pro Tour race in his career. As they came around the final bend, a little bit like Lance Armstrong and Marco Pantani a few years ago, Valverde sat up to allow this young rider to come up and get himself the victory.
His first ever win. He calls himself a super domestique. Now he has won on top of Mont Ventoux. Cadel Evans, the clock had tipped by, 1:54 had gone. Cadel Evans had ridden a great climb, but totally outnumbered, and he would lose his yellow jersey now to the defending champion Valverde. The victory then to Schmidt. Valverde same time, Zubeldia home third at 1 minute 14. The new leader on the block is Valverde. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll bring you up to date with stages 6 and 7, and then we'll go live with the final stage of the Dauphiné Libéré. See you in just a moment. Welcome back as we look back at a week of racing at the Criterium de Dauphiné Libéré, an overall race of just over 1,000 kilometres. We're looking back before we go to the final stage live. But let's pick it up again now on stage number 6 as the riders get into the high Alps, where they'll be paying a visit, of course, in the Tour de France. This is the Col d'Ivoire, Paul.
A very famous climb in the sport of professional cycling. 4 men off the front. They're sitting at the back there. Former French national champion, number 101, Peric Federigo. But Case d'Epargne, Phil, all over the front of the main field, in complete control for the leader, Alejandro Valverde, there in yellow.
Yes, Valverde in yellow. He is the national road racing champion of Spain as well. Cadel Evans is riding right behind him there, once into the old city in the big finishing town of Briançon. The riders now going through these narrow cobble streets, and Federigo launches an attack.
He does. He tries to catch up Jürgen van der Walle, who was the first man to move. He's actually just round the corner in the little bit of confusion there, but Federigo, he knows exactly what he wanted to do. He was looking to try and get himself the stage victory. Overtakes van der Walle inside the last 50 minutes. You can see the disgust on van der Walle's face, but France gets themselves a good stage victory.
Absolutely. Only the second of the year. He won the stage of the Dunkirk 4-day. David Moncoutier coming ahead of the big stars, though, fighting out a same-time finish here. Cadel Evans in the green points jersey, looking across at Contador, and Valverde crossing the line all together in the same time. So it's Peric Federigo who gets a win for B-Box Telecom for France ahead of Van der Walle, Stefan Goubert, but the yellow jersey still firmly ensconced. No time lost on this day by Alejandro Valverde. 2 days to go. We catch up with yesterday's stage now, stage number 7, taking the riders to a hilltop finish on Saint-François-Longchamp.
What a nasty day. The Col de Glandon, the Col de la Croix de Fer, and a first-time finish at the summit of Saint-François-Longchamp. Alejandro Valverde was waiting for the attacks to come, but his team, Case d'Epargne, were always strong. Little sprint at the top of the Croix de Fer for Peric Federigo, trying to get himself points for the King of the Mountains classification, which is pretty important in the Dauphiné Libéré, but still not rattling the cage of Alejandro Valverde at all.
Then came an attack which wasn't really marked, because David Moncoutier was not a man who was featuring very highly in this Dauphiné Libéré, so the infight continued behind him as he tried to push on for the victory. He was caught by Matthias Frank of Team BMC, the only wildcard team in this race, and I must say the American Swiss setup, I suppose, Paul, rode extremely well this week.
Yes, but David Moncoutier seems to be born again this year, because he rode absolutely superbly on that climb. So too did Cadel Evans, because you watch how many times Cadel Evans got out of the saddle and attacked Contador and attacked Valverde. I don't think I've seen Cadel Evans attack quite as many times as this on a single stage.
Outnumbered with a team that can't really help him, Cadel Evans is a different rider this year as he heads towards the Tour de France, where he's finished second for the past 2 years. He has come to his critics and he has literally learned. He has attacked everything all week and he hasn't been able to break the spirit of the riders, but he's got a new image now. 1 kilometre to go. Nobody was really worried about David Moncoutier heading for the lone victory. But watch this, Paul. Again, Evans attacking Valverde and Contador. They couldn't do a thing about it.
Well, he he attacked all the way. Victory for France again, and victory for David Moncoutier, who's a man we can watch, I think, in a couple of weeks' time in the Tour de France, because he will be looking for the big mountain stages. On the run-up to the line, it was guessing got the better of the three favourites, and a sprint finish between Evans and Alejandro Valverde, but no time differences.
So Moncoutier's second win of the season. Overall, though, there were a few seconds gain over Contador, but Valverde locked in 16 seconds ahead of Cadel Evans as we go into this final day. Contador distant third place. Further down the list, in ninth place, David Miller. He's having a good tour, really, at 5:28. And of other notable riders, Craig Lewis is also riding well in the top 20 here. Let's have a word with Cadel Evans, and I can tell you, he's a fired-up rider now in this race.
Valverde was, very good. I couldn't get rid of him, and I couldn't get rid of Contador either. You know, I would have been happy just to get rid of Valverde, of course, and then, you know, and race for the classification only, but I couldn't get rid of either. It wasn't a really selective enough climb. Maybe it was a little bit steeper. It might have suited me better against Valverde. And you're looking back at the week, of course, it's obvious I lost the race on Mont Ventoux, but in that situation, I couldn't do anything. If I kept it together then, unfortunately, with the bad luck with the team, I don't know if we could have kept the lead anyway. So, you know, we were sort of outnumbered in the team side of things more than anything.
Yes, in fairness, they lost Mario Hertz on the eve of the start of this race with a flu, and another rider went out mid-term, also sick. Cadel Evans, though, Paul, is fired up. He's got the green jersey. That's a good cue for us to have a look at our Scots green jersey update.
I think he really deserves this, Bill, because, you know, he has been aggressive. He's a completely different rider in the Dauphiné Libéré this year. The attacks all of the time, and getting himself points to earn the leader in that competition.
So Cadel Evans is our Scots green jersey of the moment as we go into this final stage now, which will bring the riders home to the sponsors, to Grenoble now, and there could be changes. This is not a flat stage as the race runs in. Stage 8 is coming up. We'll see you in a moment. Welcome back. So you're up to date with the story so far in the Dauphiné Libéré race, but there's one more stage to come. It's stage number 8, and it's not an easy route, Paul.
No, it isn't. 146 kilometres from Faverges into Grenoble, but not a flat route. 2 third category climbs to begin with, then around about 40 kilometres of flatlands before the final first category climb of the race, and that is the Côte de Saint-Bernard. And that's at just 25 kilometres to go, so Phil, it's an ideal launch pad for any late attacks.
So as we join the action, we're just inside 44 kilometres to go, and the world time trial champion Paul Bert Grapsch is trying to pull off a special win for Team Columbia High Road. He's clear by 5:21.
Well, he's a man who's a long way down in the overall classification. We've had some incredible battles over these last few days, especially going up to the summit of the Mont Ventoux, over climbs like the Galibier, the Croix de Fer, and of course the climb yesterday up to the new climb that I knew nothing at all about, Saint-François de Longchamp. But Grapsch is also facing up, Phil, in about 20 kilometres time to a first category climb, the climb of the Côte de Saint-Bernard de Touvet, and the summit of that is at around about 25 kilometres to go to the finish.
That's right, so he's not too far away from that, but 18 kilometres from the top of the climb, so he won't be too long before he's on the bottom of it. All around the riders now, because this is the most beautiful area of the Alps region of France. We're heading to the home of the sponsoring newspaper, the Dauphiné, to Grenoble, but all around them are the Alps. Memories of the upcoming Tour de France being revived here.
This is the second group on the road, a group of around about 25 riders. Nobody at all dangerous in the overall classification. They're 2 minutes behind Grapsch, but it's 5 minutes and 18 seconds back to the group containing the yellow jersey, and all of the men at the top of the overall classification, including Cadel Evans and of course Alberto Contador.
Yes, I think this was to be expected today because 3 riders have established themselves as the strong men of this week's Dauphiné, and that of course is Cadel Evans, Valverde and Contador. Contador, I think, a little below his Tour de France form. He won't be too unhappy by that. Evans has been absolutely superb, but his team hasn't been able to really support him as much as he would have liked. But they're in fighting, and they're back in the peloton at 5:16. Nobody up the road is affecting the overall situation. It was a perfect day for an opportunist, and for the moment it's the world time trial champion they're allowing out on his own.
Well, he's already had victory and glory out of the Dauphiné Libéré with the long time trial victory a couple of days ago, Phil. But I have to say, now he's trying to get Team Columbia High Road a little bit more glory and an individual stage victory. There you can see the main peloton. There's the yellow jersey, just about in 10th or 11th place, Alejandro Valverde. His team, I have to say, has been a solid team throughout this Dauphiné Libéré. Caisse d'Epargne, they're used to defending leads like this, and they're quite happy with the way the race situation is. I'm not quite sure how Bert Grabsch, though, Phil, is going to feel about this big first category climb that is looming on the horizon.
Well, this is a great tactical play here by Columbia High Road, because they put a man that nobody would regard as a road race winner out in front. And by the way, virtually all of his victories, he's won 22 events, have been time trial victories. He doesn't win many road races, so this would be a unique victory in many ways for him in the mouth of the Alps as we race into Grenoble. Here's the chase here. They're at 4:56. So the peloton, by the way, is closing in now. They've come back nearly half a minute since we started commentary. So the chase is on. And I'm sure that Cadel Evans, as we've seen, is becoming a new aggressive bike rider this week. I'm sure he will attack them on the mountain. It's his last hope.
It certainly is his last hope, and with just a few seconds that he's looking for, Phil, he will certainly, I think, try and do something rather special. You know, there are 3 riders from the Caisse d'Epargne squad in that breakaway. Of 28 riders, I've made it, just counting quickly, including, of course, Oscar Pereiro, Ivan Gutierrez and Xavier Zandio. And I wonder if their tactics later on will actually be to sit up and wait for their man who leads this race, Alejandro Valverde, because he's a little bit isolated at the back of the race with only 3 teammates alongside him.
So as we look here, we're not looking at the yellow jersey peloton, but he is coming closer at 4:53. Tim Duggan has got himself into this chase group. Let's hope he can do a little good climb, because the American has had a good tour. As we pull back, this is the situation. There is the lone leader, Bert Grabsch of Germany, and the Columbia High Road trying for what he would see as the best win of his career. We'll take a short break. Rejoin us as we head to Grenoble. Welcome back to the final day of the Dauphiné Libéré from France. Now, Faverges has a brand new motion comic available exclusively online at Faverges.com. Adventures from the epic cycle, featuring stories from the mind of Bob Roll and starring cycling's brightest stars. Take a peek at episode 2, The Three Kings, right now, and watch the full versions and the rest of the series unfold on Faverges.com.
Astana soldiers appear unstoppable, but what lies beneath the surface of victory? Johan Brunel's army overflows with talent. Leipheimer, Armstrong, Contador. Blessing or curse? Divide and conquer, or fall divided?
Well, I must say Bob Roll's excelled himself with those comic features, because the Three Kings there, well, they're all going to come head to head, and we're getting closer to the Tour de France. Anyway, back to the action here in the Dauphiné. You can see the gap is holding at about 4:51. We've just dipped inside 40 kilometres or 25 miles. Bert Grabsch here holding off a very, very large chasing group just now.
I counted that chasing group at 28 riders there, around about 2 minutes and 10 seconds behind him on the road, and then almost 5 minutes back to the main field. But that could all change, Phil, on the slopes of the first category climb, the summit of which is at 119 kilometres covered, or 25 kilometres to go to the finish. And that's where we may well see a turning of the tables. Caisse d'Epargne have cleverly put 3 riders into this chasing group, but watch out too, because in fact also in that group Team Columbia have got their man Adam Hansen and also Rabon, so they've got pretty much the race covered.
And they won't be chasing, of course, while their man is up the road. And the Caisse d'Epargne won't drive it too far either. The best riders in this group are more than 9 minutes behind the race leader, so there's no reason to panic in that respect. We're seeing 4:50 back to the yellow jersey of Alejandro Valverde. There is the field. As you can see, Paul, there's no real action coming from this bunch. I think it's a very nervous peloton here, because the top 3 are going to hit each other as soon as the climb starts.
Not so sure about Alberto Contador. He's been a little bit reticent throughout this Dauphiné Libéré, Phil, as we get the official time distance to the finish at 40 kilometres. Contador seems to me to have been quite happy to follow the action throughout this Dauphiné Libéré. However, I have seen a new, rejuvenated and aggressive Cadel Evans Evans be born on the roads of the Dauphiné this year, with the kind of attacks that he was launching yesterday really bode well, I think, for the Tour de France. He knows, I think, if he wants to win the Tour, he can't ride a calculating race. He's got to go out and take the race by the horns.
Well, I'm sure he's made a lot more friends because of the attitude he took on the hills. We all felt a little bit sorry for him. He had no men he could use as counter-attackers to break up Valverde or indeed Contador. Contador, matter of pride, the way he hung on, because I think he really was completely shattered and lost that few seconds on the running. Anyway, this chase has got itself well organised at the moment, and there are one or two good climbers here who could disappear up the mountain when it comes, and they'll be chasing this man. It won't be a great climber. He has won a stage of the Vuelta a España, but it was a time trial, and he doesn't like the hilly time trials. He's a champion of the flat roads. But looking at this road right now, it is flat and it's got a very good surface on him. It doesn't exactly look like a time trialist on a road bike position, does it?
No, he certainly doesn't. He's a very strong bike rider. When he gets onto his time trial bike, he gets extremely low and very aerodynamic, and in fact he's losing time to that group of chasers, Phil. 1 minute and 40 seconds. He's making his way along the flatlands which link two climbs. They went over after about 57 kilometers of racing, the Côte de la Frenne. They've ridden 30 or 40 kilometers on the flat, but you can see a little bit of organization. These riders in this group of 28 here are all starting to think to themselves, well, this is a good chance, this is a good opportunity to get a stage victory, because none of us are a threat in the overall race to Valverde, Evans or Contador.
Well, Igor Anton in the breakaway, Marco Velo, Tim Duggan, the American rider there on the Garmin slipstream. Nice to see him in the breakaway. They've been looking for their move, and don't forget, these riders are hoping for a place in the Tour de France, so they want to impress, and this is a good break to get into today.
Well, another American in this leading group is a rider from Team BMC, because Brent Buchwalter, who's been pretty aggressive, and there he is in the black and white jersey of BMC. He's been quite aggressive throughout the Dauphiné, so this, I think, Phil, has been a pretty good event for the American riders.
Yeah. Well, this is an area which was once the venue for the 1968 Olympic Games in the winter around Villard-de-Lans and Grenoble. It's a beautiful ski zone, but they've chosen a flat approach, but they're going to go over the Alps before they come down to the finish in Grenoble. A lot of nervous people here. This is the yellow jersey group of Valverde. He was magnificent on Mont Ventoux. He advertised the fact he was going to attack. All he said was, I will attack and try my best. Well, his best recouped him at 1 minute 54 seconds and more by the top.
He really did announce what he was going to do, and although it doesn't look like there's a massive organised chase at the front end of the peloton here, Phil, I can see they're already having an effect on the gap over the man at the front. It's down to 4.5 minutes. You know, because of the size of that group at 28 riders, it could completely and utterly change on the slopes of the Côte de Saint-Bernard, which is a climb of around about 7.5 kilometers with an average gradient at 10%. There's the green jersey on the shoulders of Cadel Evans. There shouldn't be any challenge to his lead in that points classification at all, because he's got a big advantage as we scooch a little bit further up the road to see here Bert Grabsch. Team Columbia High Road, he's starting the day in 102nd place overall, but he's more than an hour behind Alejandro Valverde in the overall classification. Such a difficult race has the Dauphiné been this year.
Well, Valverde said yesterday that Evans, he reckoned, attacked on 15 occasions and he wasn't able to unhitch him. I think he hurt them both, and they were on the ropes, but he wasn't able to ride away. If only he'd had a little bit of a stronger team around him, it would have been a different race, that's for sure. But now we'll see, because those attacks have got to come. Evans does need a steep climb to break those two boys, because otherwise they can't follow him. That's the trouble.
Well, just as a recap, Evans is the man leading the points classification. Peric Federigo from Bouygues Telecom is the man who leads the King of the Mountains at Polka Dot. In second position behind him is David Moncoutier. Now, there's a lot of points available at the top of the climb, which is probably why I would think Moncoutier is not too happy with this situation. And the best team in the race is currently Team Astana.
Well, it's bad news for Grabsch at the moment, because the chase group is closing in and the yellow jersey group is closing in. They're down to 4.5 minutes behind the leader. Okay, well, one rider who we're expecting to try and get a place on the Tour de France with Garmin slipstream this year is Dan Martin. And we'll tell you more about him when we come back.
I don't know if I'm cocky. I've grown up with a winning mentality. When you're in a position to win a race, you always have to believe that you're going to win.
Welcome back to the final stage of this year's Dauphiné Libéré, coming from France. Now, one rider that a lot of people are pegging as a real star of the future is Dan Martin of Team Garmin Slipstream. The current Irish national champion was second to Alejandro Valverde at the Tour of Catalonia not long ago, and now has high hopes to ride this year's Tour de France. Here's more on Dan Martin.
Dan Martin. When I think Dan Martin, I think
the best climbing talent in modern day cycling coming up.
An extremely talented climber.
One all-day riding machine.
I mean, he's going to kick some ass and take some names.
It's still kind of a bit surreal. Yeah, that first year was kind of interesting because everybody says he's kind of supposed to learn how to walk, and I kind of started running about June. I don't know if I'm cocky, I've grown up with a winning mentality. When you're in a position to win a race, you always have to believe that you're going to win. If you don't have that belief, it's never going to happen, and then, like, obviously, most of the time it doesn't happen. I grew up in the sport, around the sport, and I guess it was kind of natural for me to get to this position. My uncle is, he's called Stephen Roach. He won the 1987 Tour de France, as well as the Giro d'Italia and the World Championships in the same year. So he's the only guy that's done that, other than Eddie Merckx. Growing up, watching him on the TV and going to bike races with my father as well, who was also professional. And like, I was at my first bike race when I was 10 days old. It's kind of been inbred in me, the tactical way of the sport, and as far as personal ambition, it's just that search for perfection, I suppose.
Last year in the beginning of the season, I was out climbing Dan, and then all of a sudden he wins the Route du Sud, and like he was just climbing with the best guys in the world and just killing them.
The guy can go up any climb with the best of them, and he is so self-assured, so confident at his age. There's no telling what he's going to be capable of when he matures into his career.
This year, there's no pressure on him as far as his personal results in the Tour de France. He's there to help Christian, and to help our cause in the mountains, but it's only a matter of time until he's actually contending for the Tour de France.
Well, Dan Martin, Paul, used to race against his dad, didn't you?
I did race against his dad, Neil Martin, but let's not forget he's also the nephew of one Stephen Roach, so I think he's already got some pretty good genes in there, and he's a rider I think we can certainly follow with a great future.
Yes, and that's just coming up 23 years of age in August. He's a long way to go. Well, of course, Dan is going to try desperately to get a place in the Tour de France. We wish him well on that. Today in the Dauphiné Libéré race, there's a big bunch of riders trying to hunt down the world time trial champion, Bert Grapsch.
This is a group of 28 riders who got themselves clear just a little earlier, but they've only got around about a 2-minute advantage over the yellow jersey group. And I had noticed just a few moments ago a lot of red jerseys of Team Cofidis moving to the front of that main field, and it's a big challenge for David Moncoutier, because I think in the back of his mind he'd like to have a crack at trying to win the King of the Mountains classification, and that can only now be decided on the final climb of the day, the first category climb of the Côte de Saint-Bernard.
Yes, the only hill left in what has been a super course this year in the Dauphiné Libéré race. Grapsch has thought about it overnight and had a long chat with his team, I would suspect. And they said, look, you're in a position to go away from this field because you're so far behind, so give it a go.
Well, I think what's interesting that you mentioned there about the organisation, the way they've chosen this race route this year, it's had almost everything in it that the Tour de France is going to have in it. A very long opening time trial at around about 12 kilometres, 15 kilometres for the Tour. It's had the long time trial involved in it, what we saw not far away from Saint-Etienne. Then, of course, the big climb of the Provence mountain Mont Ventoux, and then some of the big Tour de France mountains like the Galibier, the Izoard, and of course the climb that the riders went over, the Croix de Fer. So it's really been a Tour de France combined into 8 days of racing.
Yes, it is, and he's just made the left turn there. We're in the town of La Terrasse, as he's now about to go over the terrace and start the climbs up the mountain to the top of the Saint Bernard du Touvet. So the climb is on for him. It's quite a long climb, this, about 7 or 8 kilometres, and I think we might see it come down rather spectacularly.
Yes, it's an average gradient of 10%, but for Grapsch, he, as you mentioned earlier, Phil, he's not one of the greatest climbers in the world, and I think we'll see his advantage, which is down to around about the 1 minute mark. In fact, I would say now, looking at the front end of the chasers, it's probably less than the 1 minute mark, and before they get to 5 kilometres from the summit, I think they may well have pulled Grapsch back into the fold.
Well, Cadel Evans back in that main field. Valverde's got a few of his teammates up in this chase group, so he's a little bit light on the ground for helpers back there. You never know. Cadel Evans might try and tempt him. I'm sure he's going to attack at some stage of this climb. But one or two of these boys now are good climbers in this breakaway. And Oscar Pereiro is in this front group as well. Maybe he's going to flex his legs on the climb and quickly close down on Grabsch.
Well, Pereiro could very easily be looking for a stage victory. There is the front end of the main field now as well. They're also crossing the Isère. And with 33 kilometres to go, it really does seem as if the gaps, Phil, are starting to shorten everywhere.
Well, the riders are running ahead of schedule today, so they haven't hung about at all. So as the bunch is on the climb, the chase group is on the climb, we'll wait for the bunch to join them. It's going to be all action now. We'll see in a moment. Yes, it's the most epic race of all, the Tour de France, and it's only on Verses. It begins July the 4th. Lance Armstrong, Carlos Sastre, Alberto Contador, and the world's greatest riders all line up in the most grueling race in the world. The 2009 Tour de France, live July 4th, only on Verses. The Tour de France is the next big race, of course, and I wonder if Big Grabsch will be on that team, Paul. I would suspect he will be. Now, Astana are having a go here. This is the first of the attacks on the climb.
Well, it's difficult for, the teams at the top end of the sport, Phil, are made up of almost 25 riders, and to choose the final 9 riders to go through to the Tour de France is always a director's nightmare. They'll fine-tune it down to 15, fine-tune it down to 11 during the Dauphiné and the Tour of Switzerland, and then finally the last 9 names normally come out after the national championships next Sunday, two Sundays' time.
Well, that was a little tack there by Diachenko, the Kazakhstan rider, on Astana, but he's quickly put in his place. They were ready for that one, as they're now settling down once again to good tempo riding. But this break, I think, will quickly start to lose its size here, and already peeking round the corner there, you can see that riders are beginning to drop off the back.
Big Adam Hansen was the rider in there for Team Columbia High Road at the front end of that group. This is a very long, tricky climb of around about 7.5 kilometres, 10%. There's Bookwalter going through there. He's been pretty present in a lot of the breakaways throughout the Dauphiné Libéré, and another move coming at the front.
Well, this is a move here, and it's coming from the B-Box Bouygues Telecom team now that they're trying to stretch it out. Remember, Fedrigo is a Milram rider, this, isn't it?
Is.
Sorry, he's got the jersey undone. It's the Milram team who's on the attack here. We'll just see what he can do. Well, he can only be, I think it is Velits himself. Yes, it is. So this is Velits making a move.
A rider who started his career off with his brother riding for a South African squad before they were snapped up and brought across to top European teams. Good to see the other rider in there from Colombia. That is Francesco Rabon, a man who is an excellent individual time trialist. And he can't climb too badly either, but he won't assist Phil in any of the pacemaking because he'll try and defend the position of Grabsch. Looks like Alejandro Valverde is a little isolated there, Phil, because after all, he's got 3 teammates at the front of the race.
Well, that's if he gets up there, they might help him. But right now, he's going to be very vigilant here. They've just started the climb. They've gone on to the slopes just under 4 minutes behind the leader on the road. And this looks quite a tough little climb, this one.
It looks as if Grabsch has been caught and put back into the fold there, because the 2 high road riders there on the left-hand side are, as I mentioned, just Hilaria. Yep, and looks as if Grabsch is going straight back. As we'd mentioned, he isn't really one of the great climbers of the sport of professional cycling.
No, he's settling in here. I thought when we got an earlier shot of him, he was slowing down there. He's laid the foundation, and he was with this group and went off on his own and got over 3 minutes, but now he's back in his place as this climb starts, and they've got about 5.5 kilometres to the top of the climb, as they now are going to show us just if they can hold off the chase behind. There's Tim Duggan there of Garmin Slipstream.
Looks like Adam Hansen's gone.
Yes, it is. It is the top man from Australia, the Queenslander, who's now going to see. This is the perfect tactic. Team Columbia taking over from Bert Grabsch, who'd set the trend. There's the green jersey. We're back in the peloton again at 3:50. You've got the green jersey there of Cadel Evans.
And look who's on his wheel. He's only really got one man to look at here. Alejandro Valverde has been matching Cadel Evans through all of the mountains as we go to the front. This, we have to say, is the American team, Team Columbia High Road, based out of San Luis Obispo. But the man off the front here is an Australian rider on that squad, and a man who I think will probably make the Tour de France selection because he really is a hard worker.
Yes, he rode his first tour last year And now he looks as though Cadel Evans has inspired his boys to give him a hand here. He's got 3 riders in front.
Well, I think what he's trying to do, he's trying to isolate Alejandro Valverde, which is why he sent all of his men of Team Silence Lotto up to the front end of this group now to start putting the hammer down, splitting the group as much as possible, reducing the numbers in that group with Alejandro Valverde, then the possibility of an attack towards the summit by the man in green, Evans.
Well, he's been particularly impressed by the hard work of a couple of his riders, not least the returning of Matthew Lloyd, who crashed out in the Classics. He said he's been riding terrifically, and I think has sealed his place on the team for the Tour de France with Cadel. And also Jurgen van den Broek, who said Cadel says has really worked beyond the call of duty for him. So let's see what they do for him now.
Well, that's Matty Lloyd there in 3rd position, a man coming back after a little bit of illness in the early part of the season, but a great talent, I think, for the future of Australian cycling. Alberto Contador there, not too far from the front in 5th or 6th position. He's used this Dauphiné, I feel, I think, to try and get his racing legs again, because after all, he was away from top competition for 57 days before he rode that opening individual time trial. And it is a lot. You lose a little bit of the edge of your rhythm.
In the old days, of course, they weren't away from cycling any days, but they've changed the whole approach to the sport now. They race at this level, which I think is a much harder level than in the old days, and now they have to have a rest period, recharge mentally as well as physically. But it's nice to see Cadel has got these boys now willing to work. Matt Lloyd, former champion of Australia, I think he'll be the first to go on the slopes if he can. What's going on here now? Tim Duggan, the 2 American teams are joining forces for a moment. One is Australian on the left for Team Columbia High Road, and the other one here is Tim Duggan of Garmin Slipstream. Now, this is a nice little move, and they've been given their head, I think. Well, they've worked for it.
Well, they've worked for it. They went in that breakaway of 28 riders very early on in the day to build up a maximum advantage of around about 5 minutes over the yellow jersey group. But I wonder what Alejandro Valverde is thinking now. He probably reckons he's only got 5 more kilometers in the Dauphiné Libéré to control. And Cadel Evans, I think, if you look at his face there, Phil, I think he's planning one final attack.
I'm absolutely convinced he is. He's got his team loosening at the front. Well, the good news is for the United States, at least 2 American team riders are up front. But the big battle in this race is right here. We'll take a break. See you in a moment. Welcome back. The riders still very much on the final climb of this year's Dauphiné Libéré race, the Montée de Saint-Bernard de Touvet, and these 2 riders are still just in front of the front group. Tim Duggan of the United States, who rides for Garmin Slipstream, and Adam Hansen, the Australian, who rides for the other American team in this event, which is Team Columbia High Road. And they're working well together. But Tim, I have to say, Paul, is looking very impressive here just now.
He's certainly got the bit between his teeth, Phil, as he jumped across the gap to get up to big Adam Hansen, and he's not scared at all of doing any pacemaking. A slightly built rider who should handle himself very well on this climb of around about 5 miles, peaking out at not a massive altitude of around about 1,000 meters. But I think what's more interesting is what's going on behind, a little further down the road. Silence Lotto have finally decided to try and rip this race apart. Keith Stepania looking over the shoulder, and that's a rider who's a teammate of Alejandro Valverde, just trying to make sure that Valverde is in good form. I think that is Arnaud Coyot, the Frenchman on that squad.
Well, it's nice to see that Evans has inspired these guys to work hard. We've lost one of them now because of the pace, but this is going to hurt the rear of the peloton. But of course, whatever happens up front, the yellow jersey will be looking simply for the green jersey of Cadel Evans. That's all he wants, as the peloton now are beginning to pick off the riders in the original breakaway. Christian Cooks is the man there from Team Milbrand, who has come backwards. This is Zandio.
Yeah, and Igor Anton in the orange jersey, a man who was very aggressive in the Tour de France just about 12 months ago. Not scared at all of going on the attack on these big mountains, but I think he probably got a massive big surprise when he saw the move going clear with Adam Hansen, and then the response coming from Timothy Duggan of the United States. And in fact, Timothy Duggan has gone and he's left Adam Hansen behind. Now, this is a great move from this young American rider, Phil, because I have to say he turned professional back in 2005. drive for the team TIAA Cref, which was basically the team that was a development team that was slowly built up to become Slipstream and then Garmin by, of course, Jonathan Vaughters. And a lot of these riders he handpicked because he felt with some coaching, with some direction, they could become competitive on the international scene. And when you're attacking on the Dauphiné, that is the international scene.
I think you can say he just arrived today, Tim Duggan. He's never ridden the Tour de France, but if he's got form like this, he might well be on the consideration list for sure. Let's have a look at the face here of Valverde. He looks quite content. No pressure. Contador looks good. Cadel Evans is waiting to hit them here. There's Cadel just peeking in the green jersey to the left. These are his teammates setting the pace. It's Jurgen van den Broek and also Matthew Lloyd of Australia, who's in second place just now.
And third place, Alberto Contador, sitting in front of the two men who are in front of him in the overall classification. Valverde first, Evans second, only separated really by seconds. And if you have a quick look at the job that's being done by Silence Lotto, the group at the front, Phil, what is this? Oh, just a little check over his shoulder to see what sort of damage is being done. Valverde looks extremely explosive, but if you look at the time gaps, when they started the climb, the leading rider on the road was almost 4.5 minutes in front of the main peloton, and it's now, in a couple of kilometers of climbing, come down to 2:20.
Yes, I think they'll see the front. I rather hope they don't now. I'd like to see Tim Duggan ride away from them, but it's a long way over the top, don't forget, and the roads, once we're over the mountain, they just plenty of descending as we head down towards the finish. 27 kilometers will be left to go. That's about 16 and a bit miles once they top out on this climb, and they should do that, I suppose, in about 40 minutes or so. Well, there's a beautiful view of the Alps here. These are the lower slopes, the foothills, if you like, that lead to all of the famous names in alpine mountains of the Tour de France. They're all around here. We're heading into Grenoble, which is the home of the sponsors. We're coming home, in fact, for the sponsors, as the Dauphiné Libéré has been a very good competition, and it's certainly projected three big names. Sadly, and because of the controversy, it looks as though Valverde will not be riding the Tour de France, because we go into Italy for 60 kilometers and he is officially suspended in Italy, and it might spread to the rest of the world, or he might win an appeal. Who knows? He's got a little bit of time. Paul, do you think he'll get away with it, Paul?
You know, I find it very complicated in this day and age when we have an international cycling union who are supposed to govern the whole of the sport, and it's a bit strange to me that one federation can say yes, the man's guilty, another federation can't actually come up and make a decision. I think there should be an overall hierarchy who decides how the sport is run internationally.
Of course there should be. In fact, an international anti-doping agency or an Olympic committee should have no authority to suspend a cyclist. This should be left to the World Cycling Union or the Spanish Cycling Federation, but not to a body which is extraneous. However, that's the situation. He's taking it to the courts, of course, and he won't talk about it, by the way. He said, I'm here to win this race, and that's what I'm doing. No comment on the rest of affairs. There will be a decision before the Tour de France, so that's for sure. He'll either be in it or he won't be. And there he is now, just trying to defend the title he won a year ago. So there's Valverde, looking as though he's still not taking any pressure. It's the workhorses here who are doing all the work for Cadel Evans. See you all in a moment. Welcome back, and we're with the leader here, which is the American Tim Duggan, living a great moment in his young career here. Born in 1982, he's now heading the race up the last climb of the Dauphiné Libéré, and a nice slice of publicity here for the Garmin Slipstream.
Well, it's a team that are always aggressive. They need a little bit of success out of this event. They'd hoped to win the team time trial in the Giro d'Italia. They finished second there to Team Columbia High Road, and that would be a crowning week, I think, for them. They almost got the first road stage victory after that dramatic move by David Miller with 5 kilometers to go, getting caught at I made it around about 50 meters to the finish line. So this may well pay well for them today. This is Matthew Lloyd on the front, the former Australian national champion, and you can see he is trying to set something up for his man Cadel Evans, who really attacked like a maniac yesterday, reputedly almost 15 times.
It looks like it's getting a little bit tough here now as Duggan takes all of the cheers, so we can expect a counter-attack. This is behind now, and this is the start of the moves, I think, because they've run out of players for Silence Lotto. Where's Matthew Lloyd? He's disappeared. That's the attack. That's the signal for Cadel. He used Matthew Lloyd as the last man. Now it's up to them. Here come the cavalry. Contador leading Valverde.
Well, Contador came across that gap very smartly indeed. I have to say, hats off, chapeau, as the French would say, to Cadel Evans, because he certainly wants to do everything, and I think this is going to bode well for the Tour de France, and he's hammering them again.
Well, this is the Cadel I know will send the Australians round the walls, because so many critics have said, yes, he only follows wheels, he never actually attacks to win races. Well, he has this week, and if we're going to see this in the Tour de France in July, then he might well improve on his second place these past 2 years. But I have to say that they've been waiting for the attack. It's been signalled all the way up the climb by the teammates of Cadel Evans, and for the moment they've tamed him. Back as status quo. He's going to go again. He's going to go again, and while they keep countering moves like this, they're going to start closing in on they're already picking off the remnants of that breakaway. Duggan on his own just now.
Xavier Zandier, I think, on the front there, or in fact it might well have been Oscar Pereiro who's come back from that leading group of riders, and that, you see, Phil, was probably the tactic of Case d'Epargne, to have those 3 riders in that leading group and then to slide back on the climb so that they could assist. There we go.
Yeah, it's another one, and they're all ready for him and straight after him. What was it Valverde said? He attacked me 15 times yesterday. I'm ready now. I've got the team around me. Well, where is it?
There is no team left. This is survival of the fittest. This is the final climb of the Dauphiné Libéré. Everybody now is going backwards. That is Rabon, the man from Columbia High Road, who was in the breakaway a little earlier. Contador comes round the corner. He doesn't really have much to do in the Dauphiné Libéré here this afternoon, except control, and Evans goes again.
Well, good old Cadel Evans, that's all I can say. These boys are under pressure. They're reliving the shades of yesterday. Contador, I think he's just below his Tour de France form. He's done pretty well to even stay in this fight, quite honestly, but he seems to be capable of it.
He claims he's got another kilo or so to lose before he gets back down to the racing weight of the month of July. Got Robert Gesink is the other rider in there for Team Rabobank. He's been pretty aggressive too, rode extremely well on the slopes of the Mont Ventoux. A little bit bigger gear for the man in yellow, Alejandro Valverde. All he's doing is looking at the man just in front of him, Cadel Evans, who wears number 11 on his back and is wearing the green jersey as the leader of the points classification.
Well, I think the Liquigas rider is Vincenzo Nibali, but we'll check out when he comes up. Gesink is the boy at the back for Rabobank, the big, tall, lanky man who seems to be able to climb hills quite well. It's just a very restless rest at the moment as they wait for Cadel to go again.
Which again, I think the lull before the storm. Cadel is not going to lay down his arms, Phil, until he gets to the top of this climb. Valverde comes round just to show Cadel Evans, there's nothing wrong with my legs here, my sunshine. If you want to win this Dauphiné Libéré, if you want to take back those 16 seconds away from me, you're going to have to attack again. But I'm comfortably sitting at the front, setting my pace.
So we've got Evans, the yellow jersey of Valverde, Contador, Nibali and Gesink. These are the riders.
David Miller from
David
Garmin
Miller's
Slipstream
just crept up on the right of our picture.
He's up in the top 10 in the overall classification, and I have to say he's riding better than he has over the last couple of years in the mountains. And in fact, there's 1 or 2 riders missing from the top 10 there. So for David Miller, he could see himself climb up a little further in the overall standings.
There he is, far left of the group here, which is becoming a very select group for a man like Miller to be riding alongside climbers like these boys. I take my hat off to David. He is climbing better than I've ever seen him climb. I must confess, I found myself shouting at the television midweek when he was coming in seemingly to win that stage and got caught right on the line. That was really unlucky.
Moncoutier has leapt out of the yellow jersey group, but nobody's going to chase Moncoutier down too much, Phil, because he's quite a long way down in the overall classification. But what he's hunting for is to try and pick up as many riders as possible to see if he can get himself maximum points at the top of this climb, a first category climb in the race for the King of the Mountains polka dot jersey, currently on the back of Peric Federigo. Here we go.
And this is another attack by Cadel. He was in a good position, though, Valverde, to quickly respond to that one. Cadel really needs to just take the pressure off and make it a bit more of a surprise. Now, look at all the team cars stopped, which means that we're cutting through all of the breakaway now, and they've been pulled off. And Cadel is demonstrating what he can do right in front of the rivals. There's another boy out the way. These are the breakaways now going back. This is Brooke Walter as they continue to climb. Cadel Evans is holding this one.
It's a long time, Phil, since I've seen anybody attack like this on a mountain. Moncoutier was off the front of the group of that Stéphane Auger there, where with the leader of the race should hopefully still be Tim Duggan at 1 kilometre to go to the summit. But what a battle is going on behind.
Well, Tim, don't even think about what's going on behind. Just stick to the job in hand here and get first over the top of this climb. They don't want you. They just want to win the race against each other. A minute 42 is all the gap is now to Tim Duggan. Moncoutier here sticking to his guns, saying he's not going to ride the Tour de France this year for a shot at the final overall, but he does want to win a major championship like the King of the Mountains.
That's what he wants, and that's what he's dreaming of, and this is the way you do something like that. You go out on the attack and take advantage of being lowly placed in the overall classification. Evans looks over his shoulder, and what he's doing is looking into the faces of the other men in this group to see whether or not they've got anything else left.
Well, whatever you say now, Cadel Evans has left his mark on this race as they continue up this climb. And Evans has finished second 2 years running in this race, and the same 2 years second in the Tour de France.
Well, I hasten to say, Phil, and I hate to say, I think he's probably going to finish second overall in the Dauphiné Libéré again this year, because every time he's attacked, and he has attacked consistently over the last 3 days of racing, but he's always had a yellow shadow there in the form of Alejandro Valverde, who I think, with the little bit of controversy surrounding him over the last couple of months and the relationship with that Operation Puerto, has decided that what he really wants to do out of this Dauphiné is make a statement, not with his mouth, not with words, but with his legs.
And look at this now. He's not offering Cadel a drink, is he? Our camera switched right. He's looking for a drink for himself. Change of bottles, looks straight at Cadel Evans, tries to give the impression he's okay. This is a little bit of attack by Lampre here, trying to get away. I'm not too sure who it is.
Well, this is a move by Lampre, who have been able to recover and recuperate from the back end of the race group.
Well, I'd go for Bandiera possibly here, although he doesn't normally climb that well. But we'll catch up with that. He's taken advantage of the in battle now. If he's got the legs, why not give it a go? Miller's holding his own, tucked in there with the orange top in his Garmin Slipstream jersey. Gesink is here to the right. It looks as though we've still got Nibali, but he's done nothing. He might be just waiting. We've got Fedrigo just coming up on the right. He's come back. He is the King of the Mountains.
Well, that is a great ride by this man, because he's not one of the great climbers. In fact, he's the kind of rider who looks for breakaways on the flatter stages. But what a way to defend his lead in the King of the Mountains classification. He said he actually wanted to try and win this title and go forward and win another title, because in 2 weekends' time we've got the national championships, and he is formerly a French national champion, and he'd like to win that title for a second time.
Meanwhile, a lonely figure, the development man from TIA Kref, the team of Jonathan Vaughan, which led to this team. As we go back to the attack here, we caught that one well. This is now a serious move here. He's going to keep this one going a bit longer. Guessing is all over his bike, wiped out the unknown man from Lampre, and now Evans has gone again. But I'm afraid, Paul,
and again,
and that's the way to do it. Where's he finding the strength? But he can't break the will of this rider.
Well, you know, Phil, he knows he's got a couple of kilometres left to go in his Dauphiné Libéré this year. Once he gets to the top of the climb, it's a false flat. There's 1 kilometre to go to the summit. That attack, or that series of attacks, actually put Alberto Contador on the edge of his saddle there, but not Alejandro Valverde.
I think Contador is suspect, but Contador's not the problem, is he? As we've gone over the top here, and boom, heck. Well, what happened here is we've been caught Steph Clement, who was in the early breakaway. Don't know where he came from, but he's obviously caught Tim Duggan and swiped the preem off him at the top.
Well, that's going to be quite good, because in fact this is one of those horrible climbs that I always hated, Phil, because once you get to the King of the Mountains point, it doesn't go downhill straight away. It carries on a false flat for about 3 or 4 kilometres. So 2 riders together may well now start to nurture a thought of getting to the finish ahead of the battle, because I think if there is no breaking of this group before we get to the summit of the climb, they'll take a back seat now and then just cruise down into Grenoble.
7 riders here. And I'll tell you that Cadel Evans has made a whole new bunch of friends in this Dauphiné Libéré race. If he loses this race, and he probably will, he's going to lose covered in glory, I think. He's hit this Alessandro Valverde so many times in 2 days. Fairness to Valverde, he's had the strength. There's the gap, a minute 40 to the 2 leaders. Here they are, they're being shown the board. 25.8 kilometres to go, just over 15 miles for the finish now. And he's a valuable rider, Steph Clement. He's a very good time trialist. Duggan's got a bit of experience alongside him now. And remember, these boys are in fighting. They might ease up over the top.
Well, that's, I think, what all of the team managers, especially of Rabobank and of Team Garmin Slipstream, will be hoping for, that the battle finishes once we get to the summit of the climb. And that's where it is.
There it is. Now let's see. Is that the end for Cadel Evans, or is Valverde going to attack him again? He's congratulated Contador. I wonder if those two Spanish are getting a little bit too friendly. We'll take a break. Rejoin us in just a moment. To all you cyclists at home, we want to fill you in on a way you can actually participate in the Tour de France yourselves, virtually, to win thousands in prizes. It's called the versusmapmyride.com Tour de France Challenge. All you need to do is ride your bike during any of the 21 stages. Check out more details at mapmyride.com/TDF. Well, it's all downhill from here on now as the riders head towards the end of this year's Dauphiné Libéré race, and we've still got Tim Duggan up front, and I think it's good news for him. He's been caught by the former champion, time trial champion of Holland here, Stef Clement. He might still be the time trial champion, actually.
I don't think he is now, but he's been 2 times the national time trial champion of Holland over the last couple of years, and is certainly a very good ally to have on board. There you can see Alejandro Valverde's being led there by his teammate Phil, and just having a look at the teammate, I think that is Gutierrez, who's come to the front to set the tempo making. You cannot say that Cadel Evans has tried to win the Dauphiné Libéré this year, because the number of times that he attacked yesterday, the number of times that he's attacked here this afternoon is really quite impressive.
Well, this looks like Diachenko coming back from Astana. He was in the breakaway. As they start to sweep them up, Gutierrez still setting the pace at the front of this group.
Vincenzo Nibali.
Nibali, who's been followed them all the way up, and he's showing us he can climb a mountain and could be a real target in the Tour de France, but then guessing too has had a very good tour here. Cadel Evans has been a lone man here trying to win the race. He's had no help from anybody whatsoever. I'm a little bit suspect, being a suspicious type of commentator. I think there's been a little bit of an allegiance between Alberto Contador and Valverde. They're both Spanish on rival teams, and they've helped to control between themselves the attacks of Evans.
That's something that works a lot in any sport, I think, around the world, especially when it comes down to national pride. And let's bear in mind that over the last few years, the Spanish have been pretty dominant in almost every sport, whether it's been tennis, soccer, or in cycling as well.
Well, there's no doubt now, in my opinion, that Valverde is going to race to his second consecutive victory in the Dauphiné Libéré race. The only Australian ever to win this race, by the way, Phil Anderson, back in 1985. Evans has had 2 seconds, and that's the way it's going to stay. It might be 3 seconds now. That's something of a record in itself, I think.
Getting right up there, certainly. But I think it's been a completely and utterly different Cadel Evans, and he will have inspired his team and his team management, I think, with the way that he's handled himself on the slopes of every climb here.
I think he'll get selection for the Tour.
Pretty good chance on getting into the final 9, I would say, especially after his racing style today.
Now, what about Tim Duggan? Will he get selection for the Tour? This is... it'll be a difficult call, I think, for Jonathan Vaughan. I think he's not quite ready yet. Might be a little bit too young, but he's certainly showing he is settling into the European cycling scene. That's a way to see the Alps, provided you don't get lost.
And that's probably the way to see the Dauphiné Libéré as well. Case d'Epargne are now extremely solid. They had men in that leading group of 28. They have slipped back into the group of Alejandro Valverde. So once again, he's shouldered by a very strong squad. Nice to see just popping in at the back in there David Miller, who is obviously going to run out in the top 10 in the overall standings at the Dauphiné. And I think that bodes well for his Tour de France selection.
Well, Zandio here, who was up the road, has come back and has joined in now with Gutierrez to just set the pace for their team captain. Champagne is already on ice back down in Grenoble. Nibali, no more attacks will come from him because the hills are undulating now, nothing serious, and I think a chance to recuperate. I think Valverde's saying to himself now, well, that's it. I can do this now, because I don't think there's any more opportunity for Cadel. Somebody's had a flat tyre there, have they?
Yeah, a little problem at the side of the road, but that should get changed very quickly and get themselves back into this group.
Yeah, it's not too sure who it was. He stopped very quickly, as they would. But as we look here now, there's 3 rides from Case d'Epargne. Little instruction too from the team leader there to say, just keep it steady, boys. They're not too worried about these two. There's still a chance. 1:22 lead for Stef Clement and Tim Duggan. Can they do it? See you in a moment. So welcome back. We're looking down on a very elite group here. The leaders of the Dauphiné Libéré on the overall classification are now preoccupied, and still up front with a lead of 1:22 is the young American on Garmin Slipstream, Tim Duggan, who has been joined by the former time trial champion of the Netherlands, Stef Clement, and they're holding that lead. 82 seconds and 22 kilometers to go.
And a number of reinforcements coming back from the rear there, Phil, because we did have a serious showdown on the slopes of that big climb, the first category climb of the Côte de Saint Bernard. But once they saw that they couldn't dislodge Alejandro Valverde, I think they've decided to slow down and set a false tempo now. And that's why we've seen one or two riders recovering from the rear and coming back into this group. And that will swell in numbers and maybe start to see some kind of an organised chase. My guess is that still third on the road is David Moncoutier, because I don't think we ever saw him coming back into the fold.
You could be right. And again, the riders in between are not the targets now, because we've just seen the flurry of action on the climb. Evans, I think, now will have surrendered. I don't see, if he can't drop them on the climb, he's not going to get away from them on the flat. He's looking for just a hatful of seconds to win this race. There are no time bonuses now in this race. There were only time bonuses at the end of stages 2 and 3. So it's real-time racing, and he's got to real-time get the gaps. That's the way it is.
Well, these two riders have got to work together and try and consolidate on that advantage to make sure they've still got around about 1.5 minutes by the time they get to the bottom of the descent, and then it's a clear run in towards the finish line. It doesn't seem as if there's any serious organised chase here. Just looking across at Vincenzo Nibali, a man we will probably see in a couple of weeks' time in the Tour de France. Now here's a move from B-Box.
Well, they've had a very, very good tour, and in fact the French team is having a good season in general. They've got the leader in the King of the Mountains here in Pedrigo. And there's another little move here, and that's Miller deciding to give it a go. Well, they're not going to chase him down. Yes, he's got a fairly high position overall, but his time gaps are quite a lot. He might well be going here to become second string if they do bring back Tim Duggan, because he's not attacking, he's countering the attacks.
I think what Miller is doing is just that, Phil. He's actually gone to cover the moves to discourage them from riding off the front end of the main field, acting as a policeman, working for the team, because when you get in a small breakaway of 2 or 3 riders, you certainly don't like having a limpet stuck to the back of you, and that limpet in this occasion would be David Miller. You see, he slowed down the chase. That's why he went across.
Well, Tim Duggan, he's 26 years of age. He'll be 27 in November. And so he's really ripe and ready if he can get a ride on the Tour de France team. He just needs a little bit more experience. He looks to be riding very strongly here. And in Stef Clement, who's not a big winner of races other than time trials either, he might have a chance if it becomes 1 against 1 in a sprint finish.
Yeah, the forte of Stef Clement really has been the individual time trial. I think he's only won 1 road stage in his whole career, and that was very early on when he was probably an under-23 rider, and that was a stage of the Olympia Tour. Tricky descent, eh?
You were a bit close there. And in fact, this is the way off the mountain now. These boys have got to be very, very vigilant on these twists and turns. So this is the region where the hills aren't as high as the big Alps, but their descents are very tortuous indeed.
Well, they're probably descending off this mountain at an average speed of between 45 and 50 miles an hour. Alejandro Valverde there with his bike. His bike, by the way, you might notice is a slightly different colour to everybody else's on the squad, and the reason for that is he is, in fact, also the national champion of Spain. And when he won that title, he didn't want the normal Spanish jersey. He wanted to have something a little bit different and more flamboyant, and he had the bike made to match.
Well, cased upon 2 faithful teammates looking after Valverde. Nibali is just behind. Contador, his characteristic style of racing is always out of the saddle, dancing away on those pedals. The big card for Astana in the upcoming Tour de France. And Valverde now settled right in, just keeping an eye on everybody. He won this race with 1 move, and that was on the Mont Ventoux.
But what a move that was. He was looking on the 1 individual stage to pull back a minute and 54 seconds on Cadel Evans. Cadel said he knows where he lost at the Dauphiné Libéré. It was on the slopes of the Mont Ventoux, but he also said and admitted he couldn't do anything at all about it.
I must say, watching Tim Duggan here, he's certainly not afraid of going downhill. In fact, Stef Clement isn't quite as brave as Tim is just at the moment. As Duggan continues down, he's only ever had 1 win in his career. It came in 2005, the Tour of Puerto Rico in San Juan, and that was the first stage of that event. He's got a hatful of medals in the under-23 national championships as a time trial rider, but this, boy, if he could land it. I would fancy his chances against Clement.
Well, Clement, as you've mentioned, Phil, really is an individual time trialist, and 9 times out of 10 really good time trialists don't have a good turn of speed. It'll be an interesting one, and I wouldn't want to put my last dollar on it.
Well, I might, because these boys have no reason to chase down those 2 riders up front. The gap has hardly moved in the last few minutes or so at 1:27, and you see this as they go down. There's no doubt who the better descender is. Well, as they go down towards the finish and we disappear in the tunnel, we'll take a quick break. Rejoin us shortly. 18 kilometres to go on this, the final day of the Dauphiné Libéré. The riders are still on what is turning out to be a very long descent, and Tim Duggan is revealing to us he likes going down hills. Look at that.
Well, he obviously does a fair amount of skiing during the winter months, because he's taking extremely good lines around these corners compared with Staff Clement, who is a little bit precarious and ginger going around the corners, and he's lost himself a couple of lengths advantage, backing off so that he can pick his own line around the corner. But he really needs to stay in contact with Duggan. Once they get to the bottom of this climb, they've only got 10 kilometres of fairly flat road through the outskirts of Grenoble to get to the finish line. The yellow neutral service car over to the right-hand side is going to come in behind these riders to protect either of them if they have any mechanical incidents.
17 kilometres to go. That's about 20 minutes of racing left. That's all that Tim Duggan has to survive out front for the best result of his career, win or finish second. Clement doesn't like going down hills as fast as Tim does. He's not quite pulling away. Really, it's a little bit of a folly, because once off this hill, Clement would only catch up again, so he's just got to play it calm, I think.
But they're going to take all of the risks, because if they can conserve a minute and a half at the bottom of this descent, they've got a fighting chance, Phil, of surviving all the way to the finish line, and I think that's why Duggan is taking the risks. Staff Clement seems to be taking the completely wrong line around all of these corners, which is why he keeps losing time on the American who was born in Boulder, Colorado, so he's no fear to the big high mountains.
No, they're a lot longer, that's for sure. Copper Mountain down in Colorado there, I think it's about 29 miles long or something like that. But as we watch here now, the peloton, their race is done, quite frankly, and that's why there's a real chance for those 2 up front. Cadel Evans has turned off the attacks. He's no good attacking down here. The gap has actually gone up by a couple of seconds. It's looking good.
I would say if Alejandro Valverde wanted to, he could probably win this final stage. He's probably the fastest man in this leading group, but he's got something else on his agenda. He wants to win the Dauphiné Libéré for a second year in succession and make an emphatic statement on the performances that he's done over the last few days. So it's not really important for him to chase down these 2 riders and go for individual glory on the final stage.
Duggan has led all the way off this mountain. Very good road surface. Long sweeping descent, hitting speeds here, as Paul has said, up to 50 miles an hour. Keep those pedals on. You've got to brake hard for those curlies as you come off the bend. And there's nobody in this peloton really chasing down here. A minute 32, 15 to go. With Paul Sherwin's formula, that's just about a catch 100 metres from the finish.
But the way the 2 riders in front are descending, they're not going to lose any time over the next 4 or 5 kilometres. There is Grenoble in the valley below, and we've got about 4.5 kilometres to get to the bottom. The way Duggan is going down this hill, I would think we'll start the final 10 kilometres still with an advantage of 1.5 minutes.
Well, these 2 riders on the front here are the Case de Pan riders. This is Zandio and Gutierrez. They're the survivors of the action to look after their team leader. They'll get 2 glasses of champagne tonight, were he to win. And I think he will now. Contador's just following. Cadel Evans in his green points leaders jersey. He's lost interest in attacking now. He's tried everything he had in the cupboard, and nothing's worked.
It would have been interesting if there'd been a slightly steeper climb on the run in towards the finish line on the last day of the Dauphiné Libéré, because that's something that Cadel Evans really enjoys, the steepness of a climb, and that could well have put Alejandro Valverde into a spot of bother. But you know what the race route is beforehand, and you have to take advantage of what are the strategic points.
Well, Duggan, I think, learned a little bit on this ride. He's now had the sense to go behind the Rabobank professional here, who has been a pro since 2003, although he hasn't won a race of note apart from time trials. really since, as Paul said, 2003, in his first year when he won the Olympia's Tour stage, which is a big stage race for elite riders in Holland. Very difficult race to do well in because it's flat and windy, and they always say if you can ride well in the Olympia's Tour, you do make a good professional later. I think that's been proved.
Well, Staff Clement is an exceptional individual time trialist, and the fact that he is, I think, bodes well for this two-man breakaway. They're going to have, I think, once they get to the final 10 kilometres, a very good chance of survival. If they go into the last 10 Ks with 1.5 minutes advantage, I think they can just pull this one off.
Well, the town which will herald the last 11 kilometres is Saint-Ismier on the Rue de Chambéry. And once we're down there, we'll be off the hills and we're heading for home into the centre of Grenoble. That's about 1.5 kilometres away before we hit the town. Steph Clement, who caught up with Tim Duggan. And Duggan, now I should imagine, is rather exciting Jonathan Vaughters here, because Vaughters has guided this man through from his young days as an under-23 time trial rider into what he is today. Apparently a top rider in the Dauphiné Libéré. Bit of a tight fit round there when they come off with all these central islands. That's not pleasant for the main peloton, I don't think.
No, it's a bit precarious in any professional bike race nowadays, trying to bring a peloton into the centre of any city in Europe, because there is so much traffic furniture on the ground, which makes it very difficult and very precarious for a main field, charging in sometimes at speeds in excess of 40 miles an hour. But for these two riders in the breakaway, they're quite comfortable. They can pick the lines they want around all of those traffic circles, while Alejandro Valverde, all he's got to do now, Phil, is tick off another 11.4 kilometres for win number 2.
But if you're an American supporter, the clock is on our side. It's up to 1 minute 35 for the two leaders. There is a chance there could be an American victory today. Don't go far away, and we'll see you back on the Route de Chamonix in just a moment. Welcome back. As we're looking at the peloton here, the gap is still stretching at 10 kilometres to go on this, the last day of the Dauphiné Libéré race, and an American, Tim Duggan, is in the hat here for a likely win. I think he might pack a sprint. He'll certainly give it his best shot. Remember the situation a couple of years ago, Paul, in the Tour of Georgia. This is the man that spectacularly crashed in the centre of the road. His bike went miles into the sky and he was seriously injured.
Yeah, Phil, that was on the 3rd stage of the Tour of Georgia, and it was a very nasty crash. In fact, in that accident, if I remember correctly, he broke not only his clavicle but also his scapula, and there was a worry at one time that he may well have a little bit of brain damage, but after that he was looked after extremely well. They said at one time that he may never ride a bike again. Yeah. Well, the way he went down that mountain a few moments ago, he showed no fear or no memory of that crash at all.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Absolutely right. He's certainly his full nerve has returned, if it ever left him, and he's now got himself in a great position here to do something about it. Be a great result for Garmin too, having seen David Miller caught right on the finishing line by a furiously sprinting pack on day 3 of this event. Anyway, it's been a good tour all round. It looks like it's going to come home with the same winner as 1 year ago, and indeed the same runner-up of 1 year ago, as these two now are still pulling away. We're up to 1:39. It's beginning to look very, very creditable now. 9.4 kilometres to go.
Looking very positive for these two riders because now they're inside of the 10 kilometre to go mark, and I don't know that anybody in that group behind really wants to organise a savage chase. Alejandro Valverde certainly doesn't. He's quite happy with the situation. He just wants to keep a close eye on Cadel Evans, and I think everybody else there seems to have lost all their will to try and win this final stage. That is the amphitheatre which hosts the city of Grenoble, and it really is a magical place to come and visit, and a magical place to ride on the valley floors. But once you do race in this area, Phil, you always know that somewhere you've got to go over a big mountain, because that's all there are in this part of the world.
It is a good base though, and especially if you're a cyclist, you get up into these lower foothills and you're absolutely in the wild of the countryside here. In the summer, the butterflies, the meadows, and you can never see a car for absolutely hours. It's a wonderful place to ride a bike. But today it's the most important finish of the Dauphiné Libéré race, which made its first ever start from Nancy a week ago. Paul and I were there. We enjoyed our visit. This is now racing on much more familiar terrain for the organisers as we go home to Grenoble.
We're just thinking about that story, Phil, of that horrific crash to this rider, Tim Duggan. You really would like the story to have a magical ending with a stage victory on the final stage of the Dauphiné Libéré. But to do that from a two-man breakaway is always a very precarious situation.
He rides with a very short position on that bike, Tim, and I have to confess, I don't know. He packs a very strong sprint finish. And Clement, remember, is a top time trialist and much more experienced, so he's going to have to be sharp if he's going to win this. That's no doubt about that. The race comes down into the finish. It goes past the Porte de Savoie and onto the Boulevard Jean Pain. Jean Bread.
Valverde, ensconced behind those dark sunglasses of his, completely concentrated on the job in hand, not thinking about victory on a final stage here. And
well, this man has just shot. This is Sebastian Joly who's just shot. Now, we never knew, we never heard he was coming, and here he is.
Well, the problem is, Phil, we had a group of 28 riders between these two men and the main field, and there's been absolutely and utterly no information on who survived from that group of 28. He was one of the early morning breakaway, and I still believe that somewhere in no man's land is David Moncoutier.
But this surely is going to add strength to Tim Duggan here now, because 3 can cause confusion. You've got a chance to play tactics now and not just go one-on-one. This would be a terrific result for Joly, I could tell you that as well, because he doesn't win many races. Has he won any?
Well, he's won 5 races in his career, but he hasn't won a race, Phil, since 2007 when he won one of the French semi-classics, Paris-Camembert. He did a couple of years before that, in fact, win the Tour of the Limousin. But he's a clever bike rider.
So they even know he's come. They've never looked around. I'm not even sure they know he's behind. They probably think it's a motorbike joining in.
Well, I wonder how many other riders are caught in no man's land. The gap is now looking extremely good for these riders.
I think it's a winning move
because
now.
At 7.1 kilometres to go, almost 2 minutes advantage, and Joly still taking the advantage of anonymity.
Well, they've not even looked round. They must have sensed by now there's a third cyclist here who's not willing to work. Tim Duggan has, and he's not willing to start working with them yet because he's recovering from what was a very good chase. He must have come down that mountain really quickly, and yet we never saw him coming. There's no comment of him coming, and here he is.
Well, bear in mind there could be 1 or 2 other riders caught in no man's land there who could still create the surprise and catch up before we get to the final kilometres or so. Staff Clement is going to have to rethink his situation here as Tim Duggan moves into second, and Sebastian Joly now thinks maybe we'll get a win for Française des Jeux.
So then there were 3, and it might even help Tim Duggan use a little bit of confusing as they race down to the finish. I am convinced now at 6 kilometres out, one of these 3 will win the stage, and Valverde will probably win the race. We'll take our final break, come back for showdown time for Tim Duggan. See you in a moment. Welcome back. The long straight road ahead. We're just inside 6 kilometres from the finish of the final day of the Dauphiné, and an American who we've never even mentioned before at this level of cycling is in with a real shout now of winning the last stage of the Dauphiné Libéré.
Well, Phil, we talked a little bit about the story of Tim Duggan, but there's also a story surrounding Sebastian Joly, because at the end of June in 2007 he had to stop racing when he found that he had a cancerous tumour. He was operated, and it took him about a year to get himself back into the sport, but he was given during that time a lot of support by Lance Armstrong, a lot of encouragement, and here he is back at the front end of a bike race.
And this as we approach 2 minutes, so there's no way now. These are first, second and third on the stage today. The peloton behind have completed their infighting and are now racing towards the end as a status quo. But is Tim Duggan going to possibly talk his way into the Tour de France with a victory today? Because surely he'd have to be given a ride on the Tour.
Well, that's the difficult thing when you're the team manager. You've got to make sure that you can pick the team that can do the job over the whole of the 3-week bike race of the Tour de France, and there's somebody who's got to fit into the team as part of the whole environment that the team has to live together as one solid block over 3 weeks.
Well, Miller will go into the Tour, there's no doubt about that, of course. Christian van der Velde, we hope, will go into the Tour. More on him when we see how he goes in the Tour de Suisse, as that's on the way this weekend, as we're going to show you shortly. But now it's 1 minute and 56 seconds, the gap. It's not coming down. So the race behind is out of it. Now Tim Duggan has to start thinking, now what do I do now? How do I outwit 2 riders, one from Holland and one from France?
Well, he's going to be very attentive. He probably thought he had a good crack of the whip against the man in the orange jersey of Rabobank, and that is Staff Clement. But now this rider who's just come up here, Sébastien Joly, is a much more experienced rider than the two riders he's with. And I think Sébastien Joly has got the ability to pack a good punch.
Well, he's ridden the Tour de France 3 times. He is obviously very experienced. His best finish, by the way, is 106th. That doesn't mean anything. The fact is he's finished the Tour twice of the 3 attempts. And the last time he rode was back in 2006. That was when he was about to develop his problems from cancer, and he abandoned on stage 15. Almost got to the end.
It's a pretty difficult situation to be in. These riders know they've got to keep riding, and probably Sébastien Joly knows a little bit more about the race, Phil, than we do, and how many riders are still actually caught in between the two groups. Because one man who I never actually saw come back to the group behind of Alejandro Valverde is Oscar Pereiro. So we could have 4 or 5 riders still stuck in that 2-minute gap.
Well, if Joly can come across anonymously, who else could come across? These boys keep looking over the shoulders, and there may be behind our camera there is a little group chasing. We do not know, but Joly has made the gap, that's for sure, and he's recovered now, and he's starting to help this group, and the result is it's going up all of the time. Well, as we approach the finish, it is the right direction. They are gaining more and more time. Overall, they're nowhere. That doesn't matter. To say you've won a stage of the Dauphiné Libéré will go down pretty well back home, whether you come from America, from France, or from Holland.
They're still working extremely well together. They know that they dare not start to play cat and mouse tactics, Phil, till they get to the last 400 or 500 meters. Looking a little bit further back, there's another move coming off here, and Cadel Evans is still trying to get the gap.
Well, he's got 1 second. He needs just a few more, but I don't think that'll happen. But again, he's earning himself a lot of friends with the way he's riding this race. 2 minutes 9 seconds, 2 kilometers to go. The break is safe, and Cadel Evans is showing that points jersey, which is for the most consistent daily finisher. That's simply what it means, the race on points, and that's a good victory for Cadel because he's been very consistent. 2 kilometers to go for the leaders. Now, what's going to happen, Paul?
Well, we're going to wait until we get to the final 500 meters, and then they're going to try and get themselves sorted out and see who is going to lead out the sprint. My gut feeling would tell me that that man will lead out the sprint, because as a time trialist, he needs to make the sprint a very long sprint. He won't be explosive, so he'll look at winding up at around about 300 or 400 meters to go. If I was Tim Duggan, I would get myself locked into the wheel of the man from Rabobank and then try to come out of his slipstream.
Well, Joly won Paris-Camembert, which is a kind of French classic, back in 2007, and if memory serves me right, that was a sprint from a small group, so it might be a case of déjà vu here. Duggan will have to watch. There he goes. They've got to look left because that was the move. Now the reaction has come, well, thankfully, from Clement. So that's given Duggan a free ride across the gap, and that was a good move. And I must confess, even I wasn't expecting it this far out. He's over a kilometre to go.
Clement hasn't got the power. Tim Duggan, if you want to win now, jump out of the slipstream and go straight after that rider, because your chance of victory is slipping away from you. You can't work together man and man on this. You've got to give everything at this point.
You know, this is where the experience was lacking there. There was a moment's hesitation, a blink of the eyelid. That was a very, very good move by Sébastien Joly. He must be tired from the chase. Now, I don't think they can catch him, but he's fully committed. It's up to now Steph Clement to give Duggan a hand and see if they can shut it down, because he's in 110% in the red zone, but that's a big gap.
Well, Phil, he hit them from 3rd position. They didn't know he was going to hit them. He hit them hard, but in fact, Staff Clement is slowly dragging him back there, but they've got to make sure that they give everything, because they can see that chance disappearing. Duggan is in an ideal position here, Phil, to maybe get the victory, because Clement is nailing back the Frenchman, and I didn't think he was going to, because I thought Joly had gone.
Well, I'll tell you what, the Frenchman has made the move and he looked a winner, but he has committed himself and blown. And now Clement is not going to even wait for Duggan. He's going to drag him back. Now, as they join, Tim Duggan is going to have to go for it.
Well, I told you one thing, that the ideal position for Tim Duggan to be in would be into the slipstream of Staff Clement. He's saving a little bit of energy, not much, but enough maybe to give him the edge to accelerate. Clement now accelerates and starts the sprint in the final straight.
Steph Clement Clement has done all the hard work to catch the man, but Duggan is going to have to try, but he can't come off his wheel. He did not have the strength. Steph Clement really deserved that victory. He used the energy to catch Joly, and he had the strength in the bank to just pip Tim Duggan. Duggan lost that probably by a quarter of a wheel, but hey, second place on the stage is not bad either.
Well, he was in the right place to do it. He just did not have that last little bit of acceleration. Further down the road, around about 2 minutes down the road, is the group of all of the big leaders of the Dauphiné Libéré. But there is the winner of the stage, Steph Clement, and that's one of his first road race victories, Phil, since around about 2005.
6 years, 2003, and he won the Olympias Tour, so he's going to be pretty happy with that. Even the cameraman is having a word.
Well done, guys. Yes.
Well, they're talking to him in English, but that is a big result. Rabobank suddenly are on a high. Menchoff winning the Giro d'Italia, and now we've got this man winning the last stage of the Dauphiné. Here is the sprint again. There really was no more legs left there for Tim Duggan, but let's face it, he made the move that turned out to be the winning move on that climb today.
Well, back to the overall race now. There's the yellow jersey, Alejandro Valverde, just counting out the time now until he crosses the finish line. Behind him, not too far behind him, of course, you might just have noticed Cadel Evans. Further back down the road, these riders were caught in the middle. This is Adam Hansen, who was in that breakaway, and he managed to survive.
Well, fourth place for Adam Hansen, so there were survivors chasing all of the time. We never saw these guys. They're the remnants of what was a big break today. And they're still coming in because there's Moncoutier, so Paul was right. He wasn't caught on the climbs. He's in the red and over to the left of our picture, and he's going to just give it a little bit of a kick to the line as well. These guys coming in just under 2 minutes since the sprint for the win. David Moncoutier will be happy with the way he's ridden this week. He's won a stage as well. And there is the peloton, almost winding it up for him now. Evans in the green points jersey, watching from afar as the riders hit the line. The winner of the Dauphiné Libéré race, just a slight raise of his hands. Alejandro Valverde is the winner for the second year running. Second for the third year running will beat Cadel Evans.
Well, that really is quite an amazing feat for Cadel Evans. He tried, though, this year more than I think he's ever tried in his life before to get the victory. Look at this one more time. I explained to Tim Duggan exactly what he had to do, get into the wheel of the Steph Clement and then try and come off the slipstream. But I think both of these men, Phil, they were just almost on the edge of collapse.
So there we are. They were right at the end of the percentage there, 110%. Steph Clement gets the stage. Tim Duggan, for my money, gets a brilliant second place. So there is the result of the day. Clement getting the victory, same time, of course, as Tim Duggan. 2 seconds back to Sébastien Joly. Adam Hansen leading home Kuzinski. Igor Anton. Moncoutier getting 7th. The top 10 completed there by Martin Reinens at 2 minutes and 5 seconds. But the main interest, of course, is behind these boys when the leaders all came home together to give victory to Alejandro Valverde. Well, the man who's won today his first road race victory since May, stage 8 of the Olympias Tour back in 2003. But there he is, Steph Clement of Holland getting the victory today. So these are the final standings in this year's Dauphiné Libéré race. A win again for Alejandro Valverde by 16 seconds. No time gains at all today, and indeed no time losses, unfortunately, for Evans. He gets the second place for a third year in a row. Alberto Contador now shows he's ready for the Tour de France with third. Robert Gessing is fourth. Further down, we've got Vincenzo Nibali, who could be a reckoner in the Tour, in 7th. David Miller for Garmin Slipstream in 9th. The top 10 completed by Christophe Lemaivel. So there they are, the big three in this year's Dauphiné Libéré race. Alejandro Valverde ahead of Cadel Evans on the right and Alberto Contador. 3 big names. One may not be in the Tour de France.
One may not be, but I tell you what, Alberto Contador has ridden himself into form this year, but he's also probably learned a few lessons about how to attack, and they came from Cadel Evans, who I think has been a changed man.
Well, that wraps up the Dauphiné Libéré race with the big names on the podium. But don't go anywhere, because coming up next, we'll bring you the second stage of the Tour de Suisse. And that race started yesterday. And for a full schedule of all our programming and some great articles from me, Paul and Bob Roll, log on to our website, versus.com. Congratulations now to Alejandro Valverde. And for Paul Sherwin, I'm Faverges saying we'll see you in the moment at the Tour de Suisse.